Pastor Mark is not here today, I get to share God's word with you today, something I'm excited to do every time I get an opportunity. I thank Pastor Mark for trusting me to do that. And today we're going to get started. We're just going to jump in to the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verse 1. There it is. And that says in the New Living Translation, one day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. Listen, man, props to y'all, because in the first service, as soon as I said I'm preaching, everybody sat down. And y'all are hanging with me. You can go ahead and be seated, actually. I know you love to hear that. But I wanna focus on one phrase in this sentence for just a moment. And it's this phrase. It says, far into the wilderness. All right. Matter of fact, that is the incredibly creative title that I've given to the message today. Wilderness. All right, so just kind of bear with me. Hopefully that'll make some sense in a little while. But this phrase or this theme, wilderness, is a theme that runs throughout Scripture. And it usually represents a time of testing or trial or isolation, right? Sometimes people end up in the wilderness because of their own actions, and sometimes they find themselves there through no fault of their own. But whenever someone ends up in the wilderness, it's generally not where they are supposed to be. If we look at Moses, actually, maybe you know the story of Moses' life, maybe you don't. You can read all the details in Exodus chapter 2, but I'm going to give you a quick rundown. Moses was born during a time when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, and the people kept growing in numbers and in strength. And so at one point, a Pharaoh started freaking out. He's like, man, if they keep growing, there are going to be more of them than there is of us, and they're going to overthrow us, so we need to put a stop to that. So if you see a Hebrew baby boy born, you need to throw him in the Nile River. Yeah, and then Moses was born, and it says his mother saw that he was a special baby, and I read that, I was like, I'm pretty sure every mother thinks their baby is a special baby. But in this instance, she was right, and she made a basket, and she kind of floated him down the river, and he was discovered by the Pharaoh's daughter, who actually adopted him. And so he was raised kind of more as an Egyptian citizen, but at some point, the Bible doesn't really tell us when, he realized his Hebrew origins, and he went out to kind of see the people, and he saw this Egyptian slave driver mistreating a Hebrew slave, and he didn't do it. It wasn't a crime of passion. The Bible actually says he looked both ways and kind of made sure nobody's looking. He premeditated, but he killed the Egyptian slave driver in an attempt to kind of liberate, if you will, the Hebrew slave. And he thought that he kind of got away with it and that nobody noticed, but the next day, some Hebrews were like, who made you the prince? Are you going to kill me the way you killed that Egyptian? And he's like, uh-oh. And he found out that Pharaoh knew too. And so he had to run and flee into, you guessed it, the wilderness. And so when we discover him in Exodus chapter 3, that's where he's been for a few decades. He gets there and he comes across this well, and he rescues some sisters, and they bring him to the home of their father Jethro. And after some time, he ends up marrying Jethro's oldest daughter, Zipporah. And so Moses built a life for himself out in the wilderness. But I can't help but think that there were often times, maybe times like this one, where he's out tending the sheep and walking them through the wilderness looking for grass, that he's like, man, this is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not what was supposed to happen with my life. And in many ways, this idea of wilderness reminds me of a poem that is famous or infamous, depending on your perspective, in the special needs parent community. Yeah, and they say it's a poem, but none of the lines rhyme with one another, so it's confusing to me. But anyways, I'm not going to read the whole thing. But it's this poem, and the idea of the piece is this lady says, I'm going to explain to you what it's like to raise a child with special needs. And if you don't know, my wife and I, our daughter has moderate to severe autism, as well as some other genetic conditions. So we kind of are part of this special needs community. But this lady says, I'm going to help you understand what it's like. It's like planning and dreaming and preparing for a trip to Italy, and you get on the plane and you land, and all of a sudden you realize that you're in Holland. And in the premise of this poem, you can't just rebook your flights, you're just stuck in Holland. And she says, in many ways, Holland's not quite as wonderful as Italy, but there are some wonderful things about Holland if you're willing to seek them out in the midst of your mourning, the loss of the trip of your dreams, and the realization that this isn't where you were supposed to be. And if you want to know the truth, I hate that poem. And there's no shade. Some people really like it, and it's. I've heard stories from people who is really inspired and given them the courage. And so I don't mean to diminish that in the eyes of anyone, but I don't like it because in some ways it's accurate to what my experience has been, but in other ways it's just it doesn't go far enough, because I feel like it tries to take the experience of raising a child with disabilities or special needs and soften the edges to kind of make it more palatable. And the stanza that bugs me the most is this one. It says, it's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you notice that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips, and Holland even has Rembrandts, and all that is true. And there's some beautiful things about raising a child with disabilities that no one who isn't doing it will ever understand. But this phrase, it's just a different place, is not what it's been like for me to raise and care for and love a child with special needs. And I'm going to trust you guys to hear me and understand what I'm saying when I say this. But there are plenty of moments where this Holland feels like hell on earth, because I've dreamed of having a daughter since I was 16 years old, and this is nothing like what I've dreamed of. And sometimes it hurts, right? This girl does some things that are just maddening and unexplainable. I was like, I can't comprehend it. But then there's other times where it's, she's nonverbal, and so I can tell that she's upset or about something. And listen, she don't got words, but that's my baby girl, right? And so you've never seen somebody who can't speak boss so many people around, because that's what she does. But there's these moments where she's upset, and all I want to do is comfort and console her, but I just don't know how. I don't know why she's upset. I don't know what she needs, and she doesn't have the words to explain it, and so I just feel helpless. And the reason I'm saying this is because in those moments, I can't shake the feeling that this is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not the way that things are supposed to be, because it's not what I planned or prepared for or dreamed of. And please understand, I'm not sharing this with y'all because I want you to feel sorry for me. That ship sailed a long time ago, right? We love our daughter. We're thankful that she gets to be part of our lives. But I'm sharing it with you because I want you to see yourself in my story. You may not be raising a child with special needs, but I'm willing to bet that there's at least one part of your life that doesn't look the way you dreamed it would. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's your calling, maybe it's your relationship, your family, your finances, I don't know. But there's moments where you look at your life and you think back on your dreams and you ask yourself, how did I end up here? This is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not the way that things were supposed to go. And in those moments, that's when you know what it's like to be in the wilderness. And so I want you to think about those moments. Maybe you're in one of those wilderness seasons right now, and I want you to just kind of sit in the discomfort of what that feels like to be in the wilderness. And maybe you're not in one right now, and that's great. Congratulations. I want you to remember what it's like when you were in a season of wilderness, and kind of remember some of those feelings and bring that to the story we're about to read about Moses. Because a lot of times, man, we read these stories from these Bible characters and we get real judgy. Because we're like, Moses, what's wrong with you? I would never have done that. But we're not reading it from the perspective of someone who's sitting in the middle of the wilderness. We're reading it from someone who knows what comes 17 pages later. And so I want you to kind of sit in that tension of these wilderness moments or seasons as we dive in to Moses' story and see where we can see ourselves. And we're going to continue that story in verse 2 of Exodus chapter 3, and it says this. So deep into the wilderness, it says, there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. I read one commentator this week who said he likes to imagine throughout the rest of his life Moses saying, man, I could have saved myself a whole lot of trouble if I would have just said, hey, that bush is weird. I got to go find grass for my sheep. But instead he says, why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. Verse 4, when the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses, here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Verse 7, then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. Okay, it's not changing up there. Wait, there it is. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. And so these verses are really significant in this moment between God and Moses, because especially when it comes to how we think about wilderness moments, right? The people of Israel have been enslaved in Egypt for generations. They may not have known, they knew they were not where they were supposed to be. They had been there for so long that many of them probably felt as though God had forgotten or abandoned them. And yet here God meets Moses in a literal wilderness and declares three things about himself before we ever really even get started. First, God says, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. That means that he is the God who sees. Listen, this means that God knows what you're going through. He understands your suffering and your struggle. He knows how hard you're fighting to stay above water. He knows what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. Your wilderness situation may be lasting longer than you would like, but God sees you in the midst of it and you matter to him. Then he says, I have heard the cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. So he's not only the God who sees, he is the God who hears. Your prayers and cries for help have not fallen on deaf ears or a hardened heart. God hears you when you cry out to him, and he has a plan to pull you out of your struggle and place you back on solid ground. It may take a little longer than you'd like it to, but just because he's not answering the way you want or according to your time frame does not mean he isn't listening. And then finally he says in verse 8, so I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. So he's not only the God who sees, the God who hears. Above all else, he is also the God who rescues. And it's not enough to just see our struggle and hear our cries for help. We serve a God who will enter into the messy muck of our captivity to sin and brokenness and rescue us. And not only will he rescue us, but he will lead us out of that captivity, out of the wilderness, and into a fertile and spacious land all our own. God will not leave us wallowing in captivity forever, and he won't let you rot in the wilderness. If you're willing to trust him, he will do more in and through you than you could ever hope, dream, or imagine, but you've got to be willing to trust him. And so we get to verse 10, and God gives Moses a calling, a commission, if you will, when he says, now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. The last couple weeks, Pastor Mark has been talking about the difference between clarity and courage. He He says sometimes we sit and we pray to God for clarity, but we really already know what we're supposed to do, and we just lack the courage to step out in faith and trust him to do it. And I don't think you can get a better picture of that than what we're about to see in the life of Moses, because you can't get much clearer than this. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people of Israel out of Egypt. That's clear. And what happens with us is we read stories like the one of Moses and we say, man, listen, if God would just be that specific with me and tell me what I am called to do, it'd be a whole lot easier for me to trust and follow him. You know, the problem with that line of thinking is we do have a specific calling from God as Christ followers. It may not be this individual will on a day-to-day basis, but it's this universal will that God has for all of us as Christ followers. In Matthew 28:19, Jesus gave a command to his disciples that extends to all Christ followers even to this day. He said, therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And so while the way it happens may look different for each of us, we know that what we're supposed to do, we know what we're called to make disciples and teach them to obey the commands Jesus has given. This can look like preaching a sermon, or it can look like sharing a meal, but it always involves bringing a little bit of heaven down to earth. And then we can go even further, because in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 12 and 13, the teacher, the one whose wisdom is being shared throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, he shares a different but similar version of our universal calling as believers when he says, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. And so when we think of calling and purpose, we tend to think on these huge, grandiose scales of changing the world and doing these amazing things and making a specific impact. We don't think of navigating disappointment or overcoming loss or persevering through setbacks or just showing up in a way that points people back to Jesus. But that is our call as believers, to do good, because those small things can make just as much difference in the lives of those around us as these great big things that we think of as changing the world. The teacher in Ecclesiastes says there is nothing better than to be happy and to do of chapter 3 and the first part of chapter 4, we're going to see 5 different ways that Moses pushes back against the call of God. And rather than get judgy with Moses, I want us to sit in the tension of our own wilderness moments and see how maybe we would respond in these same things. So let's look. The first objection happens in verse 11. It says, but Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Man, for most of us, who am I is a common objection when it comes to living out the purpose and the calling of God. We don't see the value in ourselves, and so we're unable to see how God can use us. But if we look at this just purely from Moses' perspective, this is kind of a reasonable question. Because God says, hey, go. I want you to speak to Pharaoh. I want you to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. And Moses can kind of be, hey, God, I don't know if you know this, but I am a convicted murderer, a wanted felon in Egypt. And if I go to Pharaoh, he's probably just going to throw me to prison or just get me dead right there on the spot. And then even if I survive talking to that dude, I was raised in the Egyptian palace, and so none of the Israelites really want anything to do with me. And I don't think they really are going to allow me to lead them out of captivity. And so he's got all these reasons from what he's done and who he used to be as to why he shouldn't be the one to do this thing that God is calling him to do. And again, from a purely logical or human perspective, they're kind of legit reasons. And sometimes we do the same thing. When it comes to our own usability, we tend to bring our past or our pain or our problems or our perceived inadequacies to the equation, and we eliminate ourselves from opportunities because of what we've done or who we used to be. We forget that when we are in Christ, we are a new creation. And God's response in verse 12 shows us that none of that matters. I love this. God says, so remember, Moses says, who am I? And God answers, I will be with you. And this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. To me, this is like God giving a parent answer. All right, so you know, when I was growing up, I guarantee you this happened to you too. When I was growing up, anytime my dad or mom, hey guys, they're here today. Anytime they would ask me to do something that didn't make sense to me, I would just be like, why do we have to do this? And most of the time, the answer would be something along the lines of, because I said so. And I am a big why person. Like my brain doesn't work right if it doesn't understand the why behind something. So that would always really frustrate me. And I was like, you know, as young as like 12, 13 years old, I'm never going to say that to my kids. Yeah, right. Y'all people ask too many questions. Sometimes I ain't got time. It's just because I said so. And you know, my youngest son, who's not in the room today, he's like the biggest. He's just like his daddy. He wants to know why of everything before he'll do it. And I'm like, man, would you just put on your shoes so we can go to school? We're going to be late. Because I said so, you know. And so Moses is like, he's asking these big existential questions like, God, but who am I? Who am I? Why should I be the one to go? And God said, man, let's go. Because I said so. Because I will be with you. That's why. You don't got to worry about who you are or what you got. I'm going to be there. Let's come on. But again, man, we do the same thing. We give these same excuses. And I love God because he thinks he's funny, man. Because he tells Moses, you got to look at this really carefully. Read it. He says, let me find it. It says, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. So he's saying, hey, you go, I'll be with you. This is your sign that I'm the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. If I'm Moses, I'm like, my sign that you're sending me is that when it's already over, I'll be back here? That don't make no sense, man. But the reality is, how often are we able to look back at a season when we weren't sure that God was with us, and we look back and we say, oh, he was there all right. And that's what God is saying here is, man, you're going to see a sign that if you trust me, if you let me be with you in this process, then someday you're going to be back at this very mountain. You're going to remember this conversation. You're going to look back at everything that you went through, and you're going to say, oh. And then in verse 13, though we see Moses' second objection. Moses protested. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? So Moses is like, all right, who am I didn't work. Let's try this one. Who are you? Again, you got to understand the tension of the wilderness, because this is a reasonable question. The Israelites have been in Egypt for generations, and all of those who were alive at this time had not witnessed firsthand God's miraculous power and provision. So Moses says, man, who should I tell them you are? Pastor Mark referenced this thought recently when he talked about the importance of remembering what God has done both in our lives and the lives of others. Because if we focus too much on the wilderness we find ourselves in, if we stay too angry that we're in Holland or that we feel like we're going through hell, we might lose sight of who God is and who he's always been. And so even in Moses, so while Moses has got this reasonable argument, like, man, I'm in the wilderness, it's been generations, whatever, we also can make a counter argument for Moses, like, hey, buddy, let me tell you this. When you were a baby, you were supposed to be dead, but God saved you by giving your mother the foresight to put you in a basket and allow the Pharaoh's daughter to adopt you. When you murdered that Egyptian slave driver, you were supposed to be in prison, but God saved you by allowing you to escape to the wilderness. When you got to the wilderness, you should have starved to death, but God saved you by allowing you to find favor with the house of Jethro, which gave you a home and a family. Listen, man, life might not be the way you thought it would be, but you can't deny that God's been moving in your life even to get you to the point where you're at today. And so God says to Moses, oh, okay, who am I? Please allow me to introduce myself. Beginning in verse 14, it says, God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Verse 15, God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations. So God starts his reply by saying, I'll tell you who I am. I am. That's all you need to know. Right? But what's beautiful about this is that the same Hebrew word, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but the same Hebrew word that God uses to introduce himself to Moses is the exact same word he used a couple of verses ago when Moses says, who am I? And God says, I will be with you. That phrase, I will be, is the same word he's saying when he says, I am who I am. I will be who I will be. What he's ultimately saying is that he is the source of all being. Right? That nothing exists except through him. He's saying, I'm the source of life. I am being itself. Without me, y'all wouldn't even be here because I am. But he is also a God that promises that he will be with his people and that he will be whatever they need him to be in order to be rescued. Because he's a God who keeps his promises. He says, I am, I will be. But then, and I love this, he takes it one step further and he says, but you can call me Yahweh. And here's what Yahweh means. So if I am or I will be, if that's first person, Yahweh now takes it to third person. And so what God is doing is saying, hey, every time you call my name, what you're saying is he is and he will be. You're calling me by the name that reveals the character that I've just told you who I am. And so when you call on me, it is in itself a declaration that I'm going to show up for you. When you call my name, it is you saying back to me, I believe you're going to be there. That is the depth and the beauty of this conversation, is that every time we say the name of Yahweh back to God, we're saying he is the one who is and the one who will be. He will be our source. He will be our strength. He will be with us in every moment, even in the middle of the wilderness. And so when God says, this is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations, he is saying that he not only will be with his people as he rescues them from Egypt and leads them out of the wilderness, he will be with them and their ancestors forever and ever, which means that he will be with us in the middle of whatever wilderness we might find ourselves in today. And none of this is something that's required of him, but rather a choice that he has made. Yahweh chooses to participate in life with his people, to rescue us, redeem us, renew us, and restore us to right relationship with him. And the last thing I want to note about his name here is that this name Yahweh, in many different streams of religion, it's believed to be too sacred to be spoken or written. And so a lot of our biblical translations, out of respect for those viewpoints, they translate the name Yahweh as the Lord. And the word Lord is written very, very uniquely as a capital L and then 3 small capital letters O-R-D. So if you look at your Bible translation right now on your app or in your book, on the pages, most of the time you're going to see the phrase the Lord. And every time you see that phrase the Lord, what's written in the original Hebrew text is Yahweh. And what I love about this is the way that the narrative shifts, because it's just so beautiful what the authors of this story are doing, because up to this verse, Moses is using, and God is even using for himself, this phrase Elohim, which is a title and not a name. It essentially means deity or divine one, right? But from verse 14 in chapter 3 and then the remaining 37 chapters in the book of Exodus, anytime he's referred to by his name, Yahweh. And it's this small shift in language that's easy to miss because of the way that our translations render the name, but it reveals a really important part of the character of Yahweh. He desires not just to be revered by us, but to be known by us. He wants a relationship with his people, both collectively and individually. I'll explain it to you like this. My wife, Tiana, serves as an elementary school principal. And so anytime someone, whether it's a salesman or maybe a parent who's new to the school, someone comes and wants to speak to her, but they haven't met her yet, what they say is, hey, I need to speak to the principal. Right? That's the only way they can refer to her. As I need to speak to the principal, because they don't know each other. But all of the teachers that she invests so much time and energy in, and all of the students who she works to serve and to build connection and relationship with, when they see her in the hallways, they don't say, hi, the principal. They say, hi, Mrs. O'Brien. They call her not by her title, but by her name, because they know her. And when she comes home, we call her by Tiana or Mom, because we know her at an even more intimate level. But what I want you to understand here is what God is saying to Moses is, yes, I am Elohim. I'm the God above all gods. I'm the source of being itself. And that's great. I want you to revere me. I want you to tremble in my presence, but I also want you to know me. I want to be on a first name basis with you. Because I want you to be able to trust me that I'm going to be there when I say I will. And so the God who sees, the God who hears, the God who rescues is also the God who will be with his people. And the God who desires to be known by his people, trusted by his people, and loved by his people. And this is what truly sets Yahweh apart from all other divine beings or entities throughout history. And what makes his relationship to his people so beautiful and unique. And so for the rest of our time together this morning, I'm going to try to remember to refer to him by the name he's given to Moses in this encounter, Yahweh. Not to offend anybody who thinks that name is too sacred, but because I want to emphasize the shift in the story that is being told in these chapters. And so for the rest of chapter 3, Yahweh continues to explain to Moses who he is and how Moses should reveal this identity both to the people of Israel and to Pharaoh. And then we arrive at chapter 4. And it begins with Moses' third objection. Chapter 4, verse 1, it says, but Moses protested again. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord, Yahweh, never appeared to you? And so Moses at this point, he's just going through all the progressions that we usually go through in our wilderness seasons. He starts with who I am, he moves to who are you, and now he gets to the one that many of us are especially susceptible to. What if they? What if they don't listen? What if they laugh at me? What if they think I'm weird? What if they reject me? What if they fire me? What if they won't? What if they don't? What if we allow the fear of what if they to freeze us in our tracks and stop us from our calling a whole lot more often than we should? And listen, I want to be clear. I know we just finished a series called We Are They, and that's the good kind of they that we're called to be when we work collectively towards the vision that God has for us. What I'm talking about now is the negative kind of they. It's the they that we build up in our minds and allow to have more influence over our lives than the words that Yahweh himself has spoken over us. It's this hypothetical they that we allow to talk us out of walking in our purpose. For Moses, the they was the Israelite people. For us, it might be our coworkers, our family members, our friends, our classmates, or whoever else. We allow the possibility of their disapproval to prevent us from ever doing things that we were born to do. It could be releasing a song or sharing a testimony or discussing an idea or any other number of things, but we hold back from sharing all of who Yahweh has made us to be for fear of being rejected by or even simply not as celebrated by someone else, by they, as we think that we should be. We allow so much of our worth and identity to be wrapped up in what they think that we're unable or unwilling to trust in Yahweh, even though he has given us everything we need and promised to be with us every single step of the way. We see this in how Yahweh answers this objection from Moses beginning in verse 2. It says, "Then the Lord, Yahweh, asked him, 'What is in your hand?' 'A shepherd's staff,' Moses replied. 'Throw it down on the ground,' the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, 'Reach out and grab its tail.' So Moses reached out and grabbed it, and it turned back into a shepherd's staff in his hand. 'Perform this sign,' the Lord told him, 'then they will believe that the Lord, Yahweh, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, really has appeared to you.'" Pastor Mark has made this point on multiple occasions as well, but I love that Yahweh's answer to Moses' worry about what they might think is to ask him what's in his hand. And to me, this is a clear demonstration that whatever we might need to accomplish the work that we've been called to is already within us. See, God has created each of us with a unique set of spiritual and physical gifts that allow us to fulfill our purpose and calling in unique ways. Some of those gifts come naturally and others have to be practiced and cultivated, but they're all part of what makes us who we are and enables us to live out our purpose in the world. Just for an example, Pastor Chris, who will be back up here in a few minutes, he's shared with us on multiple occasions that he's been drawn to music since a young age, music and singing, but he's invested in those gifts, right? He's taken lessons and training and practiced, but they've always been a part of who he is. And I'm sure that there's been times in his life where he maybe felt inadequate or not up to the task or responsibility of being a worship leader, but all he had to do was to look at what was in his hand and to trust that Yahweh would be with him and then do his best. And that same thing is true for each of us. What's in your hand may be a natural proclivity for the arts or for science or for math or for speaking or for working with your hands or for serving others or for speaking up about injustice or for cooking or for teaching or for any other number of things. But God has given you a unique set of gifts, talents, passions, and relationships, which means that each of us in this room is uniquely equipped to impact the world around us in ways that only we can. And if we're willing to look past what they might think and begin to share more of ourselves with the world around us, to fully utilize what's in our hands, we will see Yahweh do things in and through us that we cannot take credit for. There is beauty and meaning that only you can add to the world. So stop letting what they might think of you keep you from showing it off. And so then for the next few verses, Yahweh gives Moses two more examples of miracles that could be performed through him to quell any potential disbelief from the Hebrews. One time he says, hey, not even what's in your hand, just take your hand. Stick your hand in your cloak, pull it out. Oh, that's leprosy. Stick it back in, pull it out. Hey, you're clean now. He's like, I got you, Moses. You don't need to worry about it. And so we get to Moses' fourth objection in verse 10 of chapter 4. It says, but Moses pleaded with the Lord, oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been and I'm not now, even though you have spoken to me. I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. Moses' fourth objection is a shadow of his first, who am I? His fourth objection is I can't, but is a shadow of who am I? When we are unsure of who we are, we tend to become more focused on what we can't do on our own than what Yahweh wants to do through us. We all have shortcomings and insufficiencies, but if we let them define our value or dictate our choices, we will never fully realize our purpose. And so we see that God shuts down this objection in a similar way to how he dismissed Moses' "who am I" questions. He starts in verse 11. Then the Lord Yahweh asked Moses, "Who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you on what to say." Listen, man, when we feel inadequate or not up to the task, we should not focus on what we can or can't do, but on who has promised to be with us and how he is opening new opportunities every single day. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, the Apostle Paul writes, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago." You might not have all the skills and abilities you wish you had, but you can impact people's lives in ways you might be taking for granted. Can I tell you that sometimes a good meal can speak louder than a good sermon? A warm welcome can heal just as many wounds as a powerful word. Don't worry about what you can't do. Use what's in your hand and trust in Yahweh to fill in the gaps and use it for his purpose. And then we get to verse 13. And at this point, Moses kind of like abandons all pretense. He's like, all right, I tried, who am I? I tried, who are you? I tried, what about that? What if they? I even tried, I can't. Listen, God, what I really mean to say is, I don't want to do it. It says, but again, Moses pleaded, "Lord, please send anyone else." He is outright saying what seems to have been true all along. I don't want it. But when Moses says these words, what he is really doing is he is declaring that he simply does not trust in Yahweh to keep his promises. And that his fear is still bigger than his faith. I ought to share with you how the last couple weeks we've been talking about the difference between clarity and courage. Moses has all the clarity he could ever ask, hope, or imagine. What he doesn't have is the courage to put one foot in front of the other and trust that God will be who he says he will be. So he begs for Yahweh to choose someone else. But man, in our wilderness seasons, we often do this same thing. When we feel unable or unwilling to step up and live out the purpose that God has called us to, whether big or small, we might call it by a different name, like insecurity or insufficiency or uncertainty, or I'm just really busy right now, or I need to pray about it a little bit longer, or I'm not sure that this is the right season for me to get involved. We might give it other names, but what we're really saying is we don't have the trust that Yahweh will keep his promises. This is especially real when we find ourselves in the middle of a wilderness that we've been wandering in for a little longer than we ever thought we would. It's hard to trust that a God, an Elohim, that feels so distant will keep his promises to be Yahweh, to be with us in the midst of isolation and loneliness. If we step back and look at Moses' situations, all of his objections might make some sense to us. Because the wilderness was not where he was supposed to be, but it's where he was, and it's where he'd been for a long time. It had become familiar. It had become predictable. It had begun to feel safe. Moses, maybe he wasn't supposed to be in the wilderness, but he knew how to be a shepherd. There was no unknown left in the wilderness. To go back to Pharaoh, to confront his past and free his people required risk. It required hope. It required trust. There were no easy answers or defined parameters, and sometimes to step out of the wilderness would be to step into chaos. And although Yahweh was promising to be with him, how could Moses really be sure? After all, where had Yahweh been the last few decades as Moses floundered in the wilderness that had become his home? Why now, after all these years of waiting and wishing and wanting for things to be different, was Yahweh promising to show up? But church, we sometimes make this same objection as well. We declare to Yahweh in so many words that we don't trust him to be with us, that we'd rather sit in the wilderness because at least we know what's coming. doesn't require a whole lot of hope or trust or risk to stay in the same spot you've been in, even though you wish you were somewhere else. But what really requires us to step out on a limb to say, you know what, God, I'm going to trust that you will be the God you said you would be, is I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and I'm leaving this wilderness with you as my guide. There's another stanza from another poem I want to read to you as we prepare to close. It's written by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and it's from book 7 of a 9-volume epic poem called Aurora Lee. I did not know there was such a thing as a poem that could fill 9 books. There is one. I've only read this one stanza though, but I love it. It's beautiful. It says this. It says, earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who seeks takes off his shoes. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries. I want you to see something. Back in Exodus chapter 3, verse 5, before Yahweh introduced himself or shared with Moses all of his promises and plans for deliverance, before he even called or commissioned Moses to go, he said something from the flames of the burning bush that we often take for granted, but that I believe is the key to this entire thing for all of us. Verse 5 in chapter 3 says this. It says, do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. Remember, verse 1 tells us that Moses was far into the wilderness when he saw the burning bush. So this was not an area of land that had been consecrated by a priest or a ritual, and yet God declared that it was holy ground. As such, we can only conclude that this ground was holy for no other reason than because God, Elohim, Yahweh, was present there, far into the wilderness. And so before ever making an introduction or a promise or issuing a call or a commission, the God who is and will be was declaring to Moses, I am with you even here in the wilderness, and so you are standing on holy ground. This means that even in the midst of your wilderness, where you have felt lost or abandoned or alone, the one who is and will be has been with you all along. And so even in that dry and lonely place, you are standing on holy ground. Throughout the entire arc of the Bible, the wilderness is portrayed as a place of trial and preparation, but never as a place of desertion. So if Yahweh is with you even now in the place you know you're not supposed to stay, why wouldn't he continue to be with you as you step into the purpose and calling for which you were created? Why wouldn't he keep his promises? Why wouldn't he push us beyond the limits of what we think we can do and beyond our concerns about what they might think and into the purpose for which we were created and designed? And why wouldn't he continue to be with us and for us as the name he has revealed to us suggests? And as you stand to your feet this morning, why shouldn't we choose to trust that he will continue to be who he has always been? The source of life itself, our provider, our redeemer, the one who calls us, the one who qualifies us, the one who equips us, and the one who will be with us every step of the way. trialed and prepared for what was next. That same Jesus, Hebrews tells us, knows exactly what you're experiencing right now. He's faced every trial and temptation that we have. And so we can come boldly to the throne of our gracious God for grace and help when we need it most. Because he is with us. Yahweh is I am, I will be. He is, he will be. And Emmanuel, Jesus is God with us